In tonight's headlines, elderly woman is rescued with self-inflicted knife cuts after she allegedly took her husband's life. 6 workers who fell into the water from a collapsed bridge in Baltimore are presumed dead. And Alibaba scraps the plan to list its logistics operation arm in Hong Kong.
It's another tragedy which will likely trigger more debate on whether there is enough support for elderly caregivers in Hong Kong. Police were alerted at around 4:30 this morning after a 71-year-old woman was found unconscious in her Kowloon Tong mansion on Beacon Hill Road. She suffered cuts to her neck and hand and was rushed to Caritas Medical Center. Her 84-year-old husband was certified dead at the scene. An initial investigation revealed that the woman had covered her spouse's nose and mouth with tape before attempting to take her own life. Police officers did not find any suicide note, but seized a knife as well as medication. It is believed that their domestic helper was planning to change the man's diaper when she found him in an unconscious state. His wife was found lying on the ground with bloodstains and a cutter nearby. Sources said the ailing woman had recently contemplated ending her own life after fearing she would soon be unable to continue taking care of her husband. Janice Low, Cable News. Security Chief Chris Tang lashed out at the New York Times for spreading misinformation about the newly implemented domestic national security legislation. Rebuting an article in the Tuesday edition of the U.S. newspaper, Tang said the SAR government strongly disapproves of and condemns the extremely misleading opinion piece. In the story titled "Hong Kongers are purging the evidence of their lost freedom," the author said people could be in breach of the security law if they had old copies of the now-defunct Apple Daily. Tang reiterated that a person only commits the offense of possessing seditious publications if there was no reasonable excuse to keep that kind of content. The bill acts with precision and defines elements of the offences with clarity, he added. The official urged the publication to stop making scaremongering remarks and set the record straight. The Customs and Excise Department handled 19,120 cases in 2023, a jump of nearly 170% from the previous year. More than 15,000 people were arrested and goods worth $10.5 billion were seized. 60%, or roughly 12,000 cases, dealt with illicit cigarettes, while drug busts took second place. Commissioner Louise Ho pointed out that smuggling of illicit cigarettes was on the rise after the government raised the duty on tobacco products for the second year in a row. However, the number of illicit cigarettes seized last year dropped by 11% to 652 million sticks. Customs believe crime syndicates are now smuggling in smaller quantities to minimize losses if a particular shipment was caught. The department is also revising operational guidelines to align with the domestic national security law, which took effect last Saturday.
After the enactment of the new law, we need to update the internal guidelines on how to perform our duties in this regard. We will also provide training to our frontline officers so that they have a thorough understanding of the new powers provided under the new ordinance.
6 construction workers who fell into the water from a collapsed bridge in the U.S. city of Baltimore are now presumed dead, as authorities called off their search before dark.
Based on the length of time that we've gone in this search, the extensive search efforts that we've put into it, the water temperature, that at this point we do not believe that we're going to find any of these individuals still alive.
Police explained the difficult decision was made to protect rescuers from the treacherous conditions at the site.
The last thing we want to do is put divers in the water with changing currents, low temperatures, very poor visibility, and so much metal and other unknown objects in the water.
We want to let them know that even though we've transitioned from a search and rescue to now a recovery mission, we will use every asset to make sure they find a sense of closure. And that's a commitment that we will keep.
The National Transportation Safety Board is trying to establish how the accident occurred. A 300-meter-long container ship plowed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge less than an hour after departing the port of Baltimore for Sri Lanka. Crew members on board reported a complete blackout and sent a distress call, but the diesel-powered vessel was traveling too quickly to change course. The bridge snapped and plunged into the Patapsco River, along with 8 people on the structure at the time. 2 of them were rescued. U.S. President Joe Biden has pledged federal funding to rebuild the bridge, although responsible parties may end up footing the final bill. The ship is owned by a Singaporean firm and chartered by Maersk, one of the biggest shipping companies in the world. Ray Minyan, Cable News.
At least 2 people have died and more than 100 hospitalized in Japan after ingesting an over-the-counter dietary supplement touted to lower cholesterol. Osaka-based Kobayashi Pharmaceutical has issued a voluntary national recall of the product, which contains a mold-like fermented rice ingredient. The firm has stopped supplying the ingredient, which is also used in a range of other food products, such as seasonings and confectionery. One of the victims took the supplement for 3 years before he died of kidney failure. Just 1 day after the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict, neither side seems to be interested in upholding the international obligation. The negotiations mediated by Qatar suffered a setback after Israel recalled its delegation from Doha. 10 days of talks failed to bear fruit after Hamas insisted on an end to the war and the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel would not surrender to what he called the Palestinian group's delusional demands. Even though the United States abstained from the Security Council vote, Washington is far from completely giving up on its staunchest ally.
We came to the determination that this Security Council resolution, although it did contain, or it lacked some provisions that we wanted to see, most notably condemning Hamas's actions on October 7th, that it called for 2 things that we support, a ceasefire and the release of hostages together. And so that's why we abstained from the resolution.
The situation seems to have worsened after 1 person was killed in northern Israel by a barrage of rockets fired from Lebanon. Another 81 Palestinians were killed in overnight Israeli airstrikes on Gaza.
In a surprise move, Alibaba has scrapped its initial public offering plans for its logistics arm Cainiao. Chairman Zhou Cai explained in a conference call that the deal no longer reflected the strategic value of its subsidiary company.
Given challenging IPO market conditions, it has become clear to us that taking Cainiao public now or in the foreseeable future would not be consistent with our group strategy, nor would any achievable valuation in an IPO reflect what we believe to be the strategic value of Cainiao at this point.
Alibaba, which currently controls 64% of Cainiao's shares, will instead offer to buy back the remaining equity held by minority shareholders for $3.75 billion. that values the logistics firm at $10.3 billion, far lower than previous market estimates. This marks the second time that Alibaba has withdrawn plans to take its operations public. Last year, it postponed plans to list its Freshippo grocery unit.